break securitizations. We analyze securitizations. To do that, you need to have infrastructure. So we have a group of people who build technology for us. They build databases. They build models, okay? At a lot of places, they silo people. So they say, this person trades CMBS, this person trades CLOs, this person trades mortgages. They're responsible for their own infrastructure. That creates competition amongst your team, which usually isn't a good thing. That creates people who don't have the same incentives because they're not gonna ever tell you there's nothing to do. If they get compensated because they've got to do what they do right there, they're never gonna tell you there's nothing to do. The other thing is that when we see something that we really want to get involved with, like a reinsurance company, which I just told you was really complicated, really complex, then I need to get a lot of people to work on it. So I can take people away from what they do, and they don't need to worry about it, and we're gonna say, we're gonna build this thing. We're gonna understand this, because this is, probably the most important thing we're gonna do going forward. So we don't have, an abundance of people. We're pretty lean. I like being lean. We give people the opportunity to learn. And I look for people who have certain characteristics, which I'll touch on a little bit. I don't think of myself as a manager, I think of myself as a coach. I have to adapt to what is handed to me. I have to react to things. I don't have a predetermined way of doing things. When you work at a big bank, somebody did your job before and you understand what you're supposed to do. And they're gonna lead you along to do that. We go down paths and have to reinvent ourselves and understand that we need to do that. And it's not always easy. And you need to have people who understand the culture. And the culture can only be so big, where you have it where everyone's like working on the same team. Because once you get so big, it just doesn't work. So we don't want to be the biggest firm on earth. We want to be really good at the things that we do. We don't think we're the smartest guys in the room. We've seen too many of them. But we think we have a really unique culture here. When I spoke in the fall, I talked about my times at April, and I talked about being self-reflective and self-critical. I think one of my greatest attributes is I understand me. I don't wish me upon anybody else. No one should be like me, because I sometimes have difficult with me. I'll be honest with you. I sometimes take on too much and sometimes don't react in the best way. And I get that, and I understand who I am. But I am self-reflective. I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm not good at. I know when I make mistakes. I was a goalie, okay? I was a goalie in lacrosse. You better be self-reflective. Put it aside and go to the next one. But you also better be self-critical and understand what you did wrong, and understand that you don't want to do it the next time. That taught me a lot, okay? But one of the greatest things that you guys can do, all right, is to be self-reflective, to be self-critical, to understand who you are, to understand what your strengths are, okay? I'm going to talk about young people now. I meet a lot of young people, and I don't know when it happened, but now all young people think that they need to define what they're going to do for the rest of their life in high school or in college, and you really don't. You really don't. I had no idea what I was going to be doing. I don't think anyone thought that I'd be doing what I am doing. And a lot of it was that I just got opportunities and took the most advantage I could of them. Develop skills, right? The people who work here, all these young guys who are going to talk to you, they know how to build models. They know how to code. They know how to be just to work on their own. They know how to ask questions, okay? They know how to ask questions and to understand. They get opportunity, they want to take that opportunity and make the most of it, because that's how they get more opportunity. Not everybody works out here, but most do, because I think we're pretty good at finding the right people. So I've just said a lot. If anyone's got any questions, real quick for me, we're going to do questions at the end, but if anybody wants me to talk a little bit about some of the things I just did, I'm happy to. If not, I want to introduce you to the guys who work with me, and they can tell you a little bit about themselves. Are there any questions?
No, I think we're good right now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to tell you the background. I'm going to tell you how they got here. Okay, so Andrew Stella, I knew his father, and his father said, can my son reach out to you? I said, sure. So we talked, And I was impressed by, he was a student athlete, he asked good questions, and he understood himself. He understood what he was looking to do. He came and joined us during COVID, and I'm a little bit old-fashioned, where I don't believe in work from home. So that's number one. I don't think that that's a productive way to learn. And during COVID, I said I want the investment team in, and what we did is we actually kind of stayed apart, believe it or not. And we were in an office, but because we were the only ones in the office, there was enough space where we could spread out. And Andrew worked with another intern, who actually, the other intern's father was a classmate of mine at Avon. And when we got to the end of the summer, he told me that he had the choice of going to hang out with his friends. He wasn't going back to school. He had a choice to go hang out with his friends and work remotely somewhere, or take classes remotely, or would he mind if he stayed on? And I said, yeah, sure. And I thought to myself, like, here's a guy who's in college, he can go have a lot of fun with his friends, but he wants to stay and work here. I said, sure. And at the end of that time, he was going back to, I think he was going back to play lacrosse, but I don't know if the season happened or not. I made him a job offer. And he's come in, he works a lot with mortgage-backed securities. He works with the person who I'd say runs the store. So I say he runs the store, this is the one who goes and does all the on-desk trading. So we really have three things we do here. We have trading, we have liabilities when it comes to insurance, and we have projects. So projects are things that we work on and building, doing things like that. We have a little bit about the firm now. We have 4 lawyers that work at the firm. We have an operations team of 5 people. We have 2 people who do administrative work on deals that we manage for a company. We're about $16 billion in assets. We have a marketing team of 4. We have a person who works for us in Abu Dhabi. We have 4 people who work in the Cayman Islands on our insurance team. And I have 3 actuaries that work in India, because we have a few Indian nationals, and they were able to get us very, very good talent in India. And these people work very hard. That's what we're looking for. So Andrew came in, joined us. He's been with us since really 2021. He looks at all the time to ABS type product. I think he's going to be able to give you a lot of insight. Next person, because I'm going to tell you the background on all of them, is Max Rosen. So Max played lacrosse at Syracuse. I actually played against his father, who was a heck of a competitor. And he also played for one of the most demanding high school coaches, probably the best high school program in the country. I'm like, if you can make it through that place, okay, you understand how to take an order, okay? You understand how to listen, because it's probably the most successful high school program of all time. I have no idea how this coach, because when I was in college, I thought he was doing things that were out of control. And this guy was a pretty tough nut. Asked the coaches at Syracuse, about Max. They said he's a great teammate, 2-time captain. And Max worked for us one summer. And he came in and he said to me, I'm thinking of not going back to school. I said, what? And he goes, I really like working. I really like making money. And because of COVID, I have 1 year left. And I'm only going to take 2 hours of class a week. And I'm going to go out of my mind. And I'd rather do this. And I'm like, geez, so the captain came to work for me, and he's going to quit, and I got to go tell the coach this. So I said, give me an hour. So he came back in. I said, this is what you're going to do. You're going to work 40 hours a week in the fall. You're going to go up for fall ball. Okay, as soon as fall ball's over, you're going to come back down. You're going to work. Then we're going to talk about a job, and then you're going to work in the spring. And gave Max a job. Max works in kind of, I'd say, administration of all the mortgages that we're buying. We're buying a lot of mortgages. He's packaged them up. He's working on building these securitizations and executing these securitizations. And he's been a great addition to the team. Last one's Will Rooney. I had the pleasure of coaching 9 years of youth lacrosse in Darien, where I used to live. I live in North Carolina now. And one of the guys I coached with, he had kids that were, he's one of the smartest guys I ever met. And he's just a happy guy. He's a great dad. And because his kids were older than me, he became like my dad consultant. Because, I know you think that all these things are easy and laid out, but, being a parent, there's no real class on that. And you got to kind of figure it out. So I used to go to him for advice, because his kids are older than mine. And one day he calls me, he goes, I got a guy, and I was wondering if you'd take a look at him for the summer. I said, yeah, sure. And he goes, well, his background's a little bit different. I said, well, what's his background? He goes, well, he worked for 5 summers at the dairy and butcher, and for the last 2 years, they let him run a store. And I said, well, I've known people who've worked in butcher shops, and that's a really hard job because you gotta clean stuff, and it's dirty, you gotta make sure it's fresh, and if you don't, store the meat in the right way, it's expensive and you lose it. But they're letting him run a store. I said, okay, I'd like to meet this young man. He came in, worked for us 1 summer, had to go back for another semester, and we made him an offer. And he came in. And these are really, I think, the only 3 people at the firm who were interns. And it's just coincidence that I said, why don't you guys come and speak to these guys? But I think they're going to be able to give you a lot of insight into what somebody, because they're probably anywhere between 6 to 8 years older than you guys. You guys are going to be going off to college soon, and you're going to have to try and figure out. And I know you're all going to try and figure out what you're going to be for the rest of your life, but I'm going to just tell you, get good skills. It's okay. Play the long game. So if it makes sense, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to turn it over. We'll start with Andrew, and Andrew's going to tell you his background and what he does every day, and then we'll have question and answers. Does that sound like a good plan?
That's great.
All right, good stuff. I'm going to go on mute. Andrew, you're on.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction, Brett. Nice to meet you guys. Yeah, I think it's probably most helpful. I'll just start with kind of my background and how I arrived here. Kind of like Brett was talking about, I thought I wanted to do a bunch of different things. I'm originally from Massachusetts, went to a all-guys Catholic school, played lacrosse and hockey, graduated from there and went and played lacrosse at Swarthmore College in Philly. Going into Swarthmore, I thought for a long time that I wanted to be a lawyer, right? I knew lawyers growing up, thought that they had a really interesting job, thought it would be, like arguing cases in front of the court every day. I thought that sounded exciting. Worked for 2 summers when I was in college doing internships, one at a local court prosecutor's office in Massachusetts, and one at the SEC in Boston, working in enforcement. Those were interesting jobs. I thought it was interesting work. The legal framework was interesting to me, but I realized that kind of second summer that it moves a lot slower than you think it does. And I thought I wanted to be a lawyer for a long time, and then going into that summer at the SEC, I learned that it's a lot slower and more market removed than you thought, or than I thought at the time. And when I first was introduced to Brett, I was explaining to him, working at the SEC, and how slow it is. And I wanted to be closer to the markets, wanted to be active every day, learning things at a faster pace, and being able to adapt to things like Brett was talking about. Adapt to things quickly and change courses. And getting into kind of the hedge fund, private asset manager space gives you that ability to do those things. I think you're able to adapt to markets quickly and build things over time. And you have more kind of white space to work on these things. So when I came into Hildene, I was an intern here, like Brett described, with another guy. It's just the 2 of us and the investment team for that summer during COVID. And there's a lot of white space that was given to us. It's kind of, when we came in, the pitch was, we don't expect you to know anything. This is a complicated asset class, a complicated space, but we expect you to ask good questions and learn as much as possible. And I think that's something that's really, stuck with me through my time here is anything that you set your mind to learn, you're able to do. It's basically how much, responsibility you want to take for your own learning environment. And if someone is giving you the opportunity to learn from them, and they have, a massive amount of experience, that's an opportunity that you don't get very often. So whenever you can ask those questions to someone, you should take advantage of it. And I think that summer I learned a ton. I had a lot of access to these guys, the senior guys with experience who were teaching me things that I didn't fully understand at the time. But it was over a summer and a fall semester of just asking questions continuously. I just kept learning more and more. And I kind of still do that today. I think it's never a bad idea to ask questions and ask for explanation. And over time, kind of evolved in this role. So jumping forward to today, like Brett said, working out, manning the store, right? So we have all these different parts of Hildene: private credit, purchasing mortgages, truck CDOs, securitizations, the insurance company. But what I do is I'm work mainly on the desk doing, active trading for all these different vehicles. We have this insurance company, we have liabilities that are financing us, and we have to go out and purchase assets against them. So it's my responsibility to interface with the street being, major banks, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citibank, and going out and purchasing securities for these accounts and these entities, and actively trading within them. And I think there are a lot of interesting things about that, right? You have to do a couple different things. You have to understand the products that you're looking at, the mortgage-backed securities that you guys learned about earlier. There's a lot of different flavors of those. There's a lot of different types, even of deals that may look similar, may look optically similar. You have to understand kind of the collateral that's backing them, and then understand where they fit in the market, right? Something could be priced at 90 and something could be priced at 80. You have to understand why those things are different, right? And understand the different relative risk and return in each one of those. So I think that's been really interesting. It's something I enjoy immensely because it's gotten me closer to that kind of thing I described earlier of being close to the market, right? You're given an opportunity set every day, and there are ways to make money in that market every day. And I think that's really exciting to me. It's something I enjoy immensely, and that's been a huge, awesome thing to work on at Hildene. But over time, we've evolved, right? So as Will and Max have joined, expanded these other fields of insurance, securitizations, and mortgages in particular, and we've kind of evolved as a firm. And as Brett described earlier, that evolution has given a lot of opportunities, right? So we've evolved into these new white spaces where you can kind of be tapped to learn these things. Brett, when we started this insurance company, came to me and a couple others and said, hey, we're gonna do this thing. We need people to work on it. Do you wanna learn how to do this? And I think that's a great environment in the sense of you can put your hand up and say, hey, I know nothing about this, but I'm willing to work on it and I'm willing to learn about it. And I think my biggest takeaway is in my career advice whenever I talk to younger people is look for those areas and those places where you can have the opportunity to learn. And when someone comes to you and says, hey, we don't really know what's going on here, but we're looking for someone to put their hand up to take the leap and learn about it, that's a huge opportunity, Working at a big bank is not something that, ever interested me. I think those places are great to start your career, but you're limited in the scope of what you can learn. And you're limited in the scope of, the expansion and white space that you can fill. And I think one of the best things about Hildene is there's a lot of that environment where it's very, academic in the sense of you're able to learn these things over time. And if no one's working on it, you're able to go work on it yourself and learn about it. And I think that's been really interesting. So I think that's kind of my quick background and what I like most about Hildene and kind of my career. But I can turn it over to Max and he can talk a little bit about what he works on today.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. I am from Central New York, right outside of Syracuse, about 15 minutes. I went to a public high school called West Tennessee, as Brett said. Played for a rather strict lacrosse coach. I would love to tell you guys everything he said to me, but I'm not sure I would be allowed back in the meeting. So I will keep that for another time. But I eventually went on to play lacrosse at Syracuse, like Brett said. I played for 4 years, went there for 5 years, tore my ACL my final year, was a 2-time captain, and truly loved every second of college. I learned a lot in the classroom, I learned a lot off the field, I learned a lot on the field, and I made the best friends that I could ever imagine. I think the biggest difference between myself and Andrew is I don't think I knew what I wanted to do until I was going into my 5th year of college. So it took me a little longer to figure out what I wanted to do. I know I wanted to make money, and I know I wanted to be something like I saw in one of those movies. I'm sure it was probably Wolf of Wall Street or something like that, but where I grew up, there's not too many people that work in investments or stock traders. You either work at the university, work at the hospital, or your mother or father works remotely for a company that's not located in Syracuse. So I had not too much background on the investment side of the world, but I was able to connect with Brett through my coach, Coach Gate, and I was given an opportunity to interview here at Hildene. Andrew actually interviewed me, and I'm sure he tell you, I probably did not impress. I think Brett may have put in a good word for me and was able to get me the internship, but by no means was I a strong candidate. I ran a landscaping business, an odd job business with my brothers and best buddies for 4 years during the summers, summer breaks during college, and by some lucky chance, I was given an opportunity to come intern here, and I think on day one, on my way home, I was like, my head just exploded. I have no idea what goes on here. Everything is super niche. There's so many different intricacies of it, and I feel like I'm going to fall so far behind. But I think the traits that I learned in lacrosse over the years is no matter how talented you are, and no matter how smart you are, if you are determined enough and work hard enough at something, you eventually will grasp what is going on. And I think that's the reason I succeeded in high school lacrosse and succeeded in college lacrosse. By no means was I ever the most athletic kid on the field. I was never the most skilled, but I can promise you every single time I left the practice and or game, there was nothing left in my tank. I left everything on the field, and I think those attributes followed me to the internship. And by the end of the summer, I gained the courage to ask Brett if I could stay on the team. And I think he talked about this a little bit. In between panic attacks and stuttering, I was able to get it out. But he came up with a plan to have me work while I was at school, finish up my certificate degree, and then continue my dream of playing lacrosse for Syracuse. And during that time period, I definitely learned how to balance time. I think my first 4 years of college, my main focus was lacrosse, school here and there, and then whenever the weekend came. My 5th year, managing, working for Hildene, playing lacrosse, and finishing up my certificate degree, what was important to me in life changed, and I think it was time to grow up. I had a great 4 years, but that 5th year was a big learning period for me. And then eventually I was given the opportunity to come back here and work full time. When I first got here, I kind of got my hand in everything, as most young people starting their career. If Andrew needed help, I was there to help him. If there was ever help on the CLO desk with Alex, I was doing what I could there. And then Isaac and Justin, who are running our private credit fund, had an abundance of work that needed some extra attention. So I slowly and surely took on the role of pricing all of the mortgages that we take on. And I think at the time when I started, we had no real model as to how we price these things. It was very, one by one, doing it by hand, taking a mortgage and seeing the certain and specific characteristics of that mortgage and pricing it to our rate sheet, which we send. Brett talked to you guys about this. We have a partnership with Cross Country Mortgage. We send a rate sheet every single day, which then gets sent to their loan officers, and it's what we are willing to pay for that mortgage. So for the first 3 to 4 months, every single day for about 8 hours a day, I would look at these mortgages, price them by hand, and eventually we got to a point where myself and my colleague Eric built out a model where we can spit in these, we can put these loan numbers in and put the characteristics in, and it'll spit out a price, which I really appreciate because I'm not spending 8 hours a day looking at 700 pages of credit documents and looking to see if these people pay their American Express cards on time and how much debt they have. But as I learned more and more, Isaac and Justin felt comfortable giving me more work, and my role has expanded a little bit from just pricing these loans on a day-to-day basis to helping with our securitizations. I've been given the opportunity to kind of decide if there's a loan that it's up for debate whether we want to buy this or not buy it. I have gotten to a point where I can make that decision, and I think just quick I'll go into these securitizations. So essentially what happens is we send out this rate sheet to Cross Country Mortgage. Their loan officers then go out and originate this mortgage. If it fits our rate sheet, we are obligated to buy that mortgage. And this mortgage is a little different. I think the best way for you guys to understand a non-QM mortgage is, I don't know if any of your myself and